Hello everyone. Welcome to our animated philosophy series where we explore timeless concepts in a modern context. Today we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating shifts in modern philosophy, particularly in the philosophy of language. We'll be exploring Ludwig Wittgenstein's intellectual journey, which takes us from his early views in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus to his later, and arguably more influential, work in philosophical investigations. Wittgenstein's transformation from thinking about language as a mirror of reality to understanding it as a social, dynamic activity was nothing short of revolutionary. So let's begin by taking a look at this fascinating evolution. When Wittgenstein wrote Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus in 1921, he was influenced by the idea that language's primary function was to picture the world. Imagine language as a sort of reflection, where sentences represent states of affairs in the world. If I say, "The cat is on the mat," this sentence, according to Wittgenstein's early views, is a direct representation of a fact in the world, the cat being on the mat. In other words, language was, for him, a tool for mapping reality, and its job was to make propositions that were either true or false depending on whether they aligned with the facts. Now, this might seem like a clean, logical way to think about language, but over time, Wittgenstein became unsatisfied with this idea. His later work, Philosophical Investigations, represents a dramatic shift. Instead of thinking that words are simply names for objects or that sentences correspond to states of affairs in the world, Wittgenstein began to see language as something far more fluid and embedded in human activities. He famously said, "Don't think, but look." In other words, don't theorize abstractly about language, just observe how we actually use it in real-life situations. And what you'll see is that the meaning of words doesn't come from some fixed relationship between words and objects or words and facts. Instead, meaning comes from use. A word gets its meaning by the way it's used in a particular social and cultural context. To illustrate this shift, let's use a simple example. Consider a student learning a new language, let's say French. In the early stages, they might start by learning that chat means cat and chaise means chair. It seems like a straightforward mapping, right? But as they become more fluent, they begin to see that the same word might have very different meanings depending on how it's used. For example, the word jeux in French translates to games in English. But what does game really mean? If you try to define game, you'll find it's nearly impossible to pin down. Is chess a game? Yes. Is football a game? Of course. But what about games that involve no competition, like solitaire? Or role-playing games where storytelling is the main point? Wittgenstein pointed out that there's no single essence that all games share. There's no set of features that every single game has in common. Instead, what we call game is determined by how we use the word in different contexts. Sometimes we use game to refer to competitive activities, other times to leisure activities, and sometimes to something entirely different. The meaning of game emerges not from a strict definition, but from its varied use in the language. Now, this realization led Wittgenstein to abandon the idea that language mirrors reality. Instead, he saw it as a tool for navigating life, something we use in many different ways depending on the situation. And this brings us to his famous phrase, meaning is use. A word's meaning is determined not by what it refers to in the world, but by how it functions in different contexts. This was a monumental shift in thinking about language. Let's go back to our student learning French. As they interact more with native speakers, they begin to realize that language is not just about naming objects or describing states of affairs. It's about doing things. They learn how to ask for directions, how to order food, how to express emotions. The meanings of words like bonjour or merci are tied not to any object but to how they are used in particular situations. They come to understand that mastering a language means mastering its use in everyday life, not simply learning a set of word to object correspondences. Wittgenstein's later philosophy is, in essence, a philosophy of action. It asks us to consider not what a word means in some abstract sense, but how it works in a particular situation. This has real-world implications for how we think about communication. For example, take the word art. Just like game, its meaning is fluid and changes depending on the context. What counts as art in a museum might not be the same thing we call art on the street. And yet, in both cases, the word art functions meaningfully in different ways depending on how people use it. Wittgenstein's shift from his early work to his later work was revolutionary because it challenged centuries of thinking about language. Philosophers before him were often looking for the essence of words, trying to pin down exact definitions. But Wittgenstein realized that language doesn't work that way. It's far more dynamic, adaptive, and grounded in human life. Words don't carry fixed meanings. They get their meanings through their use in a shared social environment. This focus on use over representation not only changed the way philosophers think about language, But it also has practical implications for how we communicate and understand each other in everyday life. When we speak, we're not just transmitting information from one brain to another. We're engaging in a social activity where the meaning of what we say depends on how it's understood and used within a specific context. So, to wrap it up, Wittgenstein's intellectual journey, from Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus to philosophical investigations, took him from seeing language as a static mirror of reality to understanding it as a fluid, social tool that changes and evolves with use. And it's this shift that continues to influence how we think about language today, in philosophy and beyond. Whether it's a student learning a new language or people navigating the complexities of communication in everyday life, Wittgenstein's insight that meaning is use remains one of the most powerful ideas in modern philosophy. Thank you for learning with us. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights into similar echoes.